just dealing with the money was an entire operation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Becoming the King of Pot. I'm Todd Denkin, as usual. With me, my partner in crime over there is Bruce Perlowin. He is the King of Pot. Bruce, welcome to episode 7, I think we're at. Episode 7.
We're really moving right along, just like we were in the old days.
Yeah, right. So last week we had Cecil Rogers on, and we talked about the Shanti, which is the boat that really launched your big smuggling career in California. So what happened next?
Okay, so the Shanti came in March of 1980. And 1980 was really one of the biggest years that I had, 1980-81. So now we've got plenty of money. I'm buying boats left and right. I'm laundering money all over the world, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Las Vegas, Cayman Islands, Bahamas, Panama, and
so
buying
what's that
boats.
like? Wait, let's not glaze over that part. When you say I'm buying boats left and right, take us through that process. What does that mean?
Okay, well, last week you met Cecil.
Yeah.
So we had Cecil. Then we had another guy who was a boat expert, Paul Hill, and I'm just buying the boats from First Cabin General. That was the big boat guy in Moss Landing, where most of the boats, were docked and worked out of. And you just buy the boats. You have to buy a boat.
You're just walking around going, give me that one, give me that one, give me that one.
No, we were with a guy named Phil DiGirolamo. And Phil would find a boat for us. He owned a company where he had investors, dentists and doctors that would invest in a fishing boat, and then they go out. There was some kind of tax incentive for them to do that. So he had like 5 or 6 boats for his company called First Cabin General. And I would buy the boats from him. Then he'd go and find another boat that he'd buy it, or he'd find them. At this point, he's just finding them for me because he's making way more money getting me boats than he is for unloading fish and buying and selling fish.
Got it.
And Cecil's checking out the boats. Sometimes there's a boat. We found one in Texas. I sent one of my captains, Brett, which is the captain of this load we're going to talk about, to Texas to buy a boat out of Texas. And it's a small community in reality, like any community of any industry. People tend to know each other, and they know what boats are for sale.
Yeah, interesting. So you become probably known as, man, that dude's buying a lot of boats.
Yeah, but only to a few people who knew me.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you're buying boats, and what else are you doing?
We're always building infrastructure. The houseboat operation. As the houseboats got completed, I would typically buy it myself, even though I'm buying it from my own company.
Right.
Make the books all look good, for taxes and all that stuff, and keep your front going. And I would move one up the Delta or down to Redwood City. We actually sold one to a guy in Sausalito, where all the houseboats were there, hanging out in Sausalito.
Yeah.
And you're opening up Luxembourg trucks, Liechtenstein trusts, Bahamian corporations. When you buy a boat, you don't just go and say, here's cash. You buy a boat and you wire the money from the Bahamas. And the paperwork says you're getting a loan from the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands. Let's say the Cayman Islands. So you got to take money down to the Caymans, put it in your bank account, and that bank account company, there's a company associated with that bank account, loans the money to buy the boat, 2, 3, and 4. So their paperwork is all clean. And you're not going down with 300,000 cash like we did with the Shanti, the first load. It's all looks like a normal boat transaction of bank loans and money wired from a bank account. So
interesting.
All
so
that.
What's it like setting all that stuff up, setting up your account in the Bahamas and Liechtenstein and all of these other places?
It's constant work, constantly. Every week we'd have a meeting with my generals. All right, one was a boat expert, one was the laundering money expert, one was the sales expert, one was the stash houses. That's another thing. You're always getting more stash houses. So we'd have a meeting. We go over what happened in the last load. And now these loads are coming in pretty back to back at this point. 5 loads came in 1980. So that's, for an 8,000-mile trip, that's back to back.
Yeah, and it's 42 days round trip, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we go over what went right, what went wrong, how can we make things better?
Sure.
The pot was wet last load. How do we correct that? Make sure we don't have pot. Was there enough pot on the beach? How did it get from the interior of Colombia to the coast? Always refining and perfecting constantly.
And tell us about the prep for this new load, because you're coming off a huge success off the Shanti, right? It was a picture perfect smuggle, right? Except for the truck going off the rails or whatever. But beyond that, everything went great. So now your confidence level is high. Everything is good. You're rolling in some cash. So take us through the process.
Okay. So one of the big things we did on this trip, or we started doing, you say, what do we do? I had a motorhome on Skyline Boulevard overlooking San Francisco Bay. And because it was on Skyline Boulevard, you had the bay in front of you and you had the ocean behind you. So you're at a top, you're on the peak. So for radio communication, we actually ended up spending like $1 million of radio equipment in there. We tracked every Coast Guard and boat and fishing fleet, everything in the Pacific Basin of 800,000 square miles.
And this is 1980. So what kind of technology are you using?
All kinds. We had Paul Hill, who's featured in this episode, what he did. His wife, Kathy, was a teacher. So she would go and take the kids on tour of the Coast Guard cutters. And, oh, great, let's go. And he would go with her, and they would peel off, and they'd go through, here's the radio room, and they would show him the radios, and they'd go, and he would lag behind, and he would look at the radio, and he'd see what frequency they were transmitting on. And if the radio didn't have the display, he'd actually turn the radio on and see what frequency they transmitted on. Now we had their frequency. So he'd write that down. It took about 3 times. He actually went on 3 different tours with the kids to get all the frequencies to make sure that they weren't transmitting on a different frequency. So after 3 times, he pretty much had all the frequencies, and we monitored those. We used Bearcat scanners. We had a $20,000, very sophisticated, $20,000, $1980, broadband scanner, which, would scan for every frequency you could think of. And you were like in a cockpit in that motorhome. When you walked into the bathroom, there was a closet. And if you opened the doors of that closet, from bottom of the floor, for desk height, all the way up to the top were solid radios and scanners. We knew who they were following in San Francisco. We knew which phones were being tapped. We were listening to their sting operations, and we wanted to warn people.
The sting operations of the Coast Guard and of who else?
No, the DEA.
Oh, DEA.
The Coast Guard didn't have much sting operations. Yeah, DEA
right.
On land following a smuggler, or not a smuggler, a dealer, and trying to bust them. We monitor all of that.
And you're hearing this, right? You're hearing this. You have somebody sitting there with headphones on, listening to all of these channels.
Yeah. And at the same time, communicating with Colombia, communicating with the boats, communicating with the dock, communicating with the walkie-talkies, communicating with my airplane. I had an airplane with a bunch of antennas sticking out the bottom of the airplane, which, we could talk on all, frequencies that airplanes don't normally talk upon. But the motorhome also had the avionic radios for the airplane. So that was like a spotter plane if we ever needed to use a spotter plane.
Watch it. Got it. And you used all of this communication just to alert if something went wrong, right? To go figure out when something goes wrong.
Yeah, like in the first trip when the boat sank, we had a plane out looking for the boat. Because the captain and crew, if those who saw some of those earlier episodes or heard those earlier episodes, knew the captain and crew got off, put the boat on automatic pilot, and Tommy took his plane out and was looking for the boat. Right. So we could take a speedboat out and jump back on if the Coast Guard didn't bust it.
Yeah.
Anyway, previous adventure.
Sure.
So now, at the same time, in the motorhome, Cecil, who was on last week, was had the sea charts up on. You would bring down a thing, and that was a bunk bed normally. But now we took the mattress off, and it was just 2 sea charts, and he gridded out the entire Pacific Ocean. So let's say if the radio said we're at A26, he could go, only he knew where A26 was, or B34, or F, 260. The whole Pacific Basin was graphed out, so we knew exactly the location without giving latitude and longitude. We had our own latitude and longitude.
Well, that's smart. Who thought of doing that?
That was Cecil. At the same time, Brett, who featured that entire story that we're going to talk about in this book, now the Golden Gate Smuggling Company, subtitle A San Francisco Marijuana Empire, talks about this particular boat. He came up with the call signs. How do you communicate? Now, he was a West Point graduate, right? So he was in the Marines, and he was really, really smart and a good seaman and an amazing human being, honorable, everything, hardworking. And when you get a boat, you have a call sign assigned to you. Let's say you say Annie Gray. It's made up of 3 numbers and 4 letters. So he said, that's a million combinations, or millions of combinations. We can give all the information that you need about our location, our communications, our fuel, emergency, mechanical condition, all in just a normal call sign that one boat calls another. For instance, let's say they would say Anna Marie. Anna Marie, this is calling Becky Lynn. All right, so Anna Marie calling the Becky Lynn. We Yankee Zulu, whiskey 4639. That just told you everything. It told you their location. It told you their fuel. It told you if they were in good running condition, if they were on time, or if they were completely fucked. Okay, which came up in this particular incident. That's why I
right.
said that.
So the guy on the headphones, he's hearing that somebody's in trouble. Yeah. So what happens?
The code that they came up with was, if you call from this particular boat, all right, in this trip it was the south wind. So if Brett, by the way, this is the Karen Lynn load, the second load, and it was an 80-foot, 100-ton shrimp boat. And again, it carried 30,000 pounds. So we had 30,000 pounds on board. And Southwind was the name of the boat. That wasn't the real name. And he would be calling the Lisa Marie. All right. And why the Lisa Marie? Because Lisa Marie was, one of the waitresses, the good-looking waitress at the Flynn's Landing, where they would sit down and have their brainstorming session. You had to make the codes. What are we going to do? How long is it going to take? Where are you going to be? What are we going to call each other? So that's what he did. He called Southwind, calling Lisa Marie. Now, if he changed his name to, let's see, the Laurel Lee, all right, instead of the Southwind, calling the Becky K was the ugliest waitress at Flynn's Landing. Then they knew that something was bad. Okay. So, and then he would
Becky
give
never knew that. Did Becky ever know that?
No. The waitress never knew. So, but it drives the point. Oh, that's the ugly waitress.
I get it.
Uh-oh,
Yeah,
something's wrong.
I see what you did there.
Okay, well, Brett did that.
Right.
So now a typical call sign would be, he would call Anna. Let me see, Southwind calling Lisa Marie, and whiskey. The 3 letters and the 4 numbers. He did that the entire trip, all the way down, all the way up. Everything was perfect until he got 5 hours away from the Golden Gate Bridge. What happened in this particular trip, well, there's adventures going on the way down. Unlike the Shanti, last week's trip, nothing went right on this one. So on this particular load, everything went wrong. And again, it's your ability to pivot that makes a load successful or not. Let's take the way down. So on the way down, they had 4,000-gallon tank, right? And on the boat, and they're plenty to get down to Costa Rica. So they say, okay, let's check the tank. There's 2 tanks. They put the broomstick down. They pull it up. Nothing. Bone dry. Uh-oh. They check the other tank. They put the broomstick down, pull it up. It's almost empty. They go, uh-oh, we're not going to make it. There's no way. We're in the middle of the ocean, the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 300 miles offshore. We're not going to make it to Costa Rica. They figure, where can we go? So now they're dead reckoning because there's no Loran down in that part of the ocean back then. So they're dead reckoning with a sextant. They go, well, here's a town in El Salvador. El Salvador is in the middle of a civil war at the time. Nicaragua is in a big fight with the Sandinistas and the Reagan administration. And the other country down there had a Marxist rebellion up in the mountains. So you got a war-torn area. So where are we going to go to get refueled? So they pull into a banana port on the west coast of El Salvador. They made it that far. Luckily, they made it. But they had no money.
What's a banana port? Is it where they ship bananas?
Yeah. It's just one dock with the little train, rail cart out to go out to the boats and load bananas.
Got it.
Well, gringos, they're out of fuel. Okay, we smell money. So it was an incredible adventure. Again, that entire adventure is outlined in this book here, which is a great read. How Brett had to go into town, get a gas station, get barrels of fuel, hire about 20 people, had to wait till the bananas were loaded, and bring them out. And you couldn't use the dock. They had to bring them out in their pagodas. They're like dug out, like canoes, big canoes, cayutas they call them or something. And got them loaded up. Good. He made it down to Costa Rica.
Wait. So you had to fill 55-gallon drums and then row them out to where your boat was and pour that from the 55-gallon drum into the gas tank?
No, they had a crane on the boat. Remember, this is a 80-foot, 100-ton shrimp boat. All right, so they had cranes and stuff. But they had to take that, and it was not easy. And by the way, you had to get it from the gas station down to the dock, right? Or at least to the beach by the dock. And get the fishermen, off-duty fishermen, not fishermen, but loaders, banana loaders, to do the same thing on their boat with the cranes. Okay. Now they make it down to Costa Rica. Great. They get more food. They get fuel up. Everything's fine. And they go to Colombia, get their 30,000 pounds, start heading home. Now, on this boat, Brett was, the captain of this boat was Brett. The first mate was Surfer Bob. And the third guy was Buck. I believe it was, So now they're on their way back. Well, every once in a while, you'd have to stop let's say, 4 days, 5 days, maybe 3 days, and change the fuel filters. So that was standard procedure. Shut down the engine, change the fuel filters, make sure that no garbage and gunk is getting into the engine, and start the boat up again. Everything went perfect. Call symbols going perfect. Everyone knew their location. And they're like 5 hours out from coming underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. They said, hey, let's shut this down and change the filters one more time. Okay? Loaded to the hilt. Shut the engine down, change the fuel filters, go to start it up like they've done the whole trip down and back. Won't start. Uh-oh. One of them said to the other, this can't be good. I forget what kind of engines they are, but they're really, really reliable. The diesel engines in these kind of boats, they can run forever. Anyways, doesn't start. They don't know why. Okay, change the call symbol. Go to the ugliest waitress. And they call. Now, Bobson was the radio guy that was a good friend of Brett's, and he was on the other end of the radio. He calls them, no answer. Now he's freaked out. He's no answer. What do you mean no answer? He calls him again. He must have called him 100 times, in the next 12 hours. No answer. So later, he said to Bob, what the hell was going on with you? Why didn't you answer me? I'm drifting off to Timbuktu. My batteries are going dead, because the engine won't start, so it doesn't charge up the batteries.
Right.
We have 3 more days, and then we can't call anymore. You can't call the Coast Guard. We're going to die out in the ocean. And he goes, well, I was on the hot seat. I heard you all the time, but I had to, tell everybody that the boat was going to be late. I had to reposition the crew. That's not what happened. That's just what he said. That's what he told Brett. What happened was he heard him, and this guy was ex-military too, and he was in special forces or worked for the CIA or somebody, and he was convinced that the government had his voice print on file. So if he talked on the radio to a smuggling boat, they would know who it was. So he was just too paranoid to answer. All right. So anyways, finally...
That's a weird reason not to answer.
Yeah, no kidding. And he says, you were on the hot seat. You're sitting on in a nice, comfortable chair with a bong and a beer, right, on shore. I'm out here with no beer, no food, because they completely ran out of food by then, and no fuel. I have fuel, but I can't start the boat with 30 tons or 15 tons of marijuana drifting off to the South Pacific, and you think you're in the fucking hot seat? Let me tell you who was in the hot seat.
Right.
So they laugh about it afterwards.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
So now we have this emergency situation, right? And I said, okay, what are we going to do? Well, in the middle of the night, it was like 11 o'clock at night, so it wasn't quite in the middle, maybe 11 to 12, we find a boat that's for sale down in Moss Landing. We're all in San Francisco waiting for the load to come in, right? And so I go down to Moss Landing and I give Paul Hill $250,000 cash to buy a boat in the middle of the night from First Cabin. The guys that sold us the boat, they're not gonna let us take the boat out without paying cash in case it gets busted. All right, so we did that, and Paul jumps on the boat all by himself and heads out to find Brett. At the same time, Shanti, from the previous load, was in San Francisco Bay at China Basin. I send that boat out to rescue him too. So now you have two boats going towards one from San Francisco, one from Moss Landing. Whoever gets there first will rescue him. You don't take a chance with that much, millions of dollars of marijuana on board. All right, so finally, after, and Brett's thinking, how does a guy from wherever, from Kansas, a farm boy from Kansas, end up in the middle of the ocean, broken down with, a boatload of marijuana, a fortune of marijuana on board, drifting out to the South Pacific? He goes, but you know what? I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It was still really excited. So, he had somewhat of confidence as soon as he never did reach Bobson on the radio. What they did, they used the Marine operator to make a telephone call because him and Surfer Bob got together. Okay, whose phone number do you remember? All right, well, let's call this guy. Well, who we can tell what's going on that won't bust them and call the police. So they got a hold of Slow Dave. If you remember, Slow Dave was one of their guys from the offload, the original offload in California.
Not a very fast guy.
No, he drove a tugboat. He's the guy that would drive 30 miles an hour on the freeway because he thinks he's in a tugboat. And everyone's beeping at him and passing him.
Did he talk really slow too?
No, he actually talked real fast. He was always nervous. So anyways, Slow Dave gets a hold of Paul. Paul gets a hold of me. So rescue mission full speed now.
So you got two boats headed towards the boat that's in trouble, and shenanigans ensue, I bet.
Right. So Paul sees him, calls on the radio, says, "Is that you, Brett?" And he goes, "Well, I'm the only one out here, so thank God I can hear your voice." Now, these guys are starving to death at this point. They ran out of food. The refrigerator wasn't working on that boat, and so they just had food that you couldn't refrigerate. Anyways, and they ate it all. So Brett pulls up now that you got 25 mile an hour, 25 knot winds, 12-foot seas, which is not terrible, but it ain't gentle either. It's not a flat ocean.
No, and 12 feet is no joke.
Yeah, so now you got to get close to the boat. All right, so Paul takes the boat, and this was a converted PT boat. So it's like a 100-foot converted PT boat that was converted from a very fast boat from World War II into a fishing boat, which is much slower. They don't need they wanted these big engines and not the super fast engines for World War II. So they pull up next to each other, and Surfer Bob and Brett, they both jump onto the boat, and they go, 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 because these two boats crash into each other in those seas. One could sink the other one. So they came within a couple feet, Paul veers away, right? And nobody died. He says that was a pretty dangerous operation. And then they spent the entire night. Oh, yeah, that was worse. It was getting sunset. So now he's dead in the water before Paul got there. He's dead in the water. It's getting dark. They turned all their lights out because they wanted to preserve the batteries. And they're drifting middle of nowhere. I think it was that night, Paul finally caught up to them. Took all night. Now, I heard the story that Paul did something really, really brave. He went he had to go from one boat to the other boat, like this, and with one of the lines.
Yeah.
Anyways, I guess it's not so easy to rig a tow, right? But they spent all night rigging a tow, and by sunlight, they were now under tow. All right. So now they're coming in.
Which boat won?
The Paul's boat. Yeah, Shanti never found him. Once Paul found him, we turned Shanti around. Okay, guys, go back. So they go back. And then you got to communicate all this stuff, right? With your radios and everything. So now they're under tow. They go right by the fishing fleet that day. They go, oh, God, I hope the Coast Guard, because if the Coast Guard would have said, you need some help, or you not need some help, they could have busted them. But the last thing a Coast Guard wants to do is interfere with the boat under tow. Think about it. They're towing them, say, pull over, right. This boat's going to crash into the back of the other boat. You don't mess with that. So, although
there's no brakes on boats, right? No brakes?
Not when the second boat has no power.
Yeah.
Can't put the thing in reverse.
Yeah.
All right, so now they go underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. We have our guy at the Golden Gate Bridge looking at, sees him, goes on a walkie-talkie. What time is it? Everybody knows 45 minutes. Well, in this case, probably an hour and a half later, because they're only going like 3 knots. It took 36 hours to get to the Golden Gate Bridge. From normal 5 hours when they broke down, if they're under their own speed, to the slowness of a tow. So they pull in, go into the boat. I send Mark. I'm on the dock at this point. I go, Mark, go out in the speedboat, one of the speedboats, and guide them in. So we had to do that, push the boat sort of in or guide it a little bit. So it got into the dock. I walked out. Our dock had a V shape because it was an old ferry slip. So I walked out on one of the pilings. Actually, it's the very end of the pilings because I'm sort of a monkey and good climber. I was a gymnast. They throw me the rope, and I pulled the rope and pulled the boat all the way into this V, all right? And then we just offloaded it. Boat was down. 57 minutes later, Brett gets in a speedboat with the whole captain and crew. They get in the speedboat. Brett, Surfer Bob, and Buck. They take him across the bay. First thing they do, they're starved to death, is get us to a restaurant. Well, Denny's was the only thing that was open, so they went and had a Denny's and, woofed down an egg omelet, and that became a successful trip at that point. But, problem going down, problem going up, overcoming the problems. And one of the things was that you were able to overcome the problems because we had the money to overcome the problems, and we had the equipment to overcome the problems.
Yeah. So did you get a Grand Slam breakfast at Denny's? No, I'm just kidding. Right. So the boat's in, right? And tell me what it's like. You say that you took the rope and you pulled it into the dock. At that point, you have relief. Is there a complete nervousness happening? Is there, oh shit, this is, tell us your frame of mind and what's happening adrenaline-wise too.
Well, adrenaline-wise, you are, like every load that came to that dock, you are maxed out with adrenaline. Everybody's Superman. These are heavy friggin' bales, 50 to 70 pound bales, and they're flying out of the hole onto the deck. I'm on the deck, throwing up onto the dock. On the dock, they're throwing it into the truck. 3 guys in the truck. They're stacking it nice and neat. Everyone's on, fuller. There's another group that's refueling the boat. We actually did refuel that boat, even though we didn't know what was mechanically wrong with it. So We left the boat unusual. Normally, the boat is gone in 57 minutes. In this case, we didn't know what was wrong with it. We didn't have mechanics there. So same scenario. Everyone's gone in 57 minutes, and the boat in this case was there except for one person, and he would stay there until daylight and make sure there's no buds on the dock or no seeds. And then when the crew came, then he would leave, and then the crew, the bosses from the houseboat operation, they would do the same thing. Just the boss and his main worker. The rest of the crew didn't know. The construction guys didn't know, but they'd get there early, make sure that the dock was, that our guy didn't miss anything. So it was really clean. And you're moving at hyper speed, to get that boat offloaded. You're relieved, that it made it in. Everyone's
sure. And then what's it like at minute 58, right? When it's all done and you're in the car on your way to wherever you're going.
Well, before that, one of the highlights of the offload is when you see the first truck go and you see it go across the Richmond Bridge, the San Rafael Richmond Bridge. You're looking for that because once that gets going on the bridge, and you can see it from the dock. We weren't very far from the dock, maybe 1,000 feet from the Richmond Bridge. That's the big, giant relief. So if anything bad happens, at least you got one truck load away. So now you're loading the second truck. Minute 58 is, whoa, we did it again. It's, the elation. But then you're still keyed up because you got to take it to the house.
Sure.
Unload it at the house, weigh it all in, check it all the bales, divide it, give the second truck to your partners. They have to make sure they pick it up and get, because every step of the way, you're very, very cautious. You get busted. There was times where the trucks broke down. One of the trucks broke down, and we had to call an emergency, like AAA. It wasn't AAA, but it was someone like
one of those.
AAA.
Right.
And so nothing is safe, nothing is done until it's done. And the reality is,
even from a money perspective, right? Even counting the money is dangerous.
Exactly. And even then, it's not done until the money is back, counted, Colombians are paid, so they're not going to kill you. Okay.
Right.
And your whole family.
Right. So this is you get this weed fronted to you, right?
Yeah. $10 a pound up front. So on 30,000, that's $300,000. And that's why I had partners, Fred and Ned, because they usually put the down payment. I was spending my money on docks and boats and stash houses and speedboats and radio equipment.
Right. So at $10 a pound, that the sort of the $300,000, and then how much do you owe them?
It was 70. We actually paid more than normal. We paid $75 a pound. And we did that because we would get Punta Rojo, which is a real high quality. We were competing against, even back then, Northern California homegrown. So some of the best homegrown anywhere in the world. Yeah. And our stuff
still
was
to this day,
near.
I might add.
Yeah, as the entire world knows.
Yeah. Okay, so how much of the $9 million that you made on the last load did you spend on this load?
Probably $10 million.
So how to not become a millionaire? Take $9 million and spend $10 million.
Yeah, I was always reinvesting in the company. Buying stash houses. A house is expensive. Buying more boats. Buying boats, like I said, in Texas. Buying more radio equipment. We had Starlight scopes. We had shotgun mics, directional mics, more scanning equipment, more radios.
Right, but if you're making $9 million and spending $10 million, how do you buy a fancy house and live the lifestyle? Oh my God!
I spent $500,000 every week in 1980. I spent $3 million on my house in Ukiah. I had a 50-man crew up there for 3.5 years.
Yeah, I was part of that crew for about 45 days.
Yeah, you remember how many people were working there? You had the wall crew, the gardening crew. We built a big heart on the top of the mountain, which I had to have helicopters fly the post and the pots of red flowers in.
Yeah, the
You know,
landing strip. You know, we had two mudslides while I was there, and we had to shovel mud out of your driveway for 48 hours straight. That was kind of fun. Um, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
yeah, I mean, we had wood that we imported from Belize, rosewood. We kiln dried it on the property, and we had the rosewood room. It was beautiful, beautiful wood. We had a lot of fine artisans making the banisters and the doors, all custom made doors, teak,
Oh yeah,
mahogany.
yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was the biggest house I'd ever seen. You know, I was 18 years old, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. You had a VCR, and nobody had a VCR back then, or it was just kind of hitting the scene. But you had like 1,000 movies. You know, it was it was like it was yeah, it was a crazy place. So you're spending $500,000 a week, and are you feeling pressure? You have all these people that you're supporting. You're holding these meetings like a big corporation. Tell me what's happening on a day to day.
Well, it's interesting because one time my partners were up there, Fred and Ned Shore, and they're in the front yard. They go, God, Bruce, you're really rocking. This is a beautiful, beautiful place you got here. We're bringing boatload after boatloads. We got everything's going really good. And I go, yeah, I know, but I wish my real work would start. They look at me and go, what do you mean your real work? He goes, well, this isn't my real work. This is just my training ground for preparing me. So I know how to deal with the billions. I'm learning how to deal with millions, which, I didn't learn that good. I didn't learn how to
Right.
save. Well, I did save. Actually, I had, when I was finally busted, I had 16 million. That's just $1980. So multiply times 4.5.
Yeah.
And bank accounts all over the world. But the guys that laundered set that up for me, they rolled over and told the government where all that money was. So I lost all
Oh,
that.
those bastards.
Yeah. Um, Actually, one of these days, they may have missed an account or two. I'm not sure. You never know. But I
Yeah,
have
what's
no
the
idea.
statute of limitations on that? Can we still get it?
If I could find the accounts, but I never knew the name of the accounts. I
Right.
mean, I just knew that they were there. My money was there, and Charlie and Jack were in control of that. If I said I need, $2 million, or not 2 million, but let's say I need $500,000 for a boat, a bigger boat than their $300,000 boats, they would just arrange to have that wired to the boat company. So everything looked normal, going from a bank account to their bank account.
Right. Right. Yeah, seems very intricate and lots to track. How many at this point, after this second smuggle, how many people you got on staff, full time?
I would say very, very close to 200. I made
Wow.
a list. I have an actual list of all the names that I can remember, and I'm up to like 203.
Wow.
And I keep finding new names that I forgot to put on the list.
Wow. 200 folks that you kept employed, bringing in 3 to 5 loads a year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 4 to 5.
4 to
You know,
5. Okay.
1980 was 5 loads. 1981 was 4 loads. A couple before that, 1979. And then even after I got busted and went to jail, the smuggling operation kept on going. I would say close to as many loads came in. Not about 25% of the loads continued to come in. Let's say I brought in 10 loads, 12 loads, closer to 15. Another 8 loads came in after I was in jail.
Wow. Wow. Well, we'll talk about that later on in our series. Anything else you want to say to wrap up this Karen Lynn adventure?
Yeah, and the Karen Lynn, the dock master, which is my brother Craig, he was at the dock at that point, but he wasn't running the dock. I was running the dock, and he was like in training. He was watching everything. He was seeing everything. He was seeing, what went on. And then little later on, that was his job. That's why he's called the dock master. And we'll have him on for the next load. Now we're getting prepared for, the Renee 2, it was called. That was the next one. And that actually came in like 2 weeks later. So
Wow.
we were
Because
really,
it is a 3-week or a 6-week back and forth trip, right?
yeah, it's 2 weeks down, 3 weeks up. So it's 5 weeks with no, and then if you go offshore, you can add another week to that.
Yeah.
But usually it's 2 weeks down, 3 weeks up.
Nice.
Downtime in Costa Rica could be anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks.
Yeah. Awesome. And how much money did we make on the Karen Lynn?
That was another $9 million. Now, when I say make, that was between me and Fred and Ned. I never finished telling you, I got 25% for offloading the boat, and then we split the other 75% 50-50. So I ended up with 67.5% of all the pot
of the
that
9
came
million.
in.
Got it. So you're still, pulling in, $6 million, $5.5, $6 million.
Right, which is basically $30 million in today's dollars.
Right. And you got to take that $6 million now and you got to go make it legit because you got to spend $500,000 a week.
Just dealing with the money was an entire operation.
Yeah.
As an example, the Colombians didn't want to take 20s. You couldn't give them 20s to take down to Colombia. Right? So we have to change the 20s into hundreds. And we covered that earlier, that we go to Las Vegas casinos, we pretend we're gambling, put in 100,000 or $250,000 in 20s. Then you'd go gamble for a few hours, come back, and they gave it to you in hundreds, until we then ended up just working directly with one of the casino owners, and we just hand them a couple million. They give us back the couple million in hundreds minus 3%. That's what they charged.
Yeah. Well, it seems reasonable.
Yeah, we were happy with it.
Yeah, that's a reasonable vig for laundering millions of dollars of cash, huh?
Yep.
That's funny. All right, so we got a new smuggle for next week. What are we talking about next week?
Okay, so next week is Renee 2. All right, and plenty of adventures, plenty of excitement, outlined in the 2 books, in this one. And
I like your sudden shameless plugs on
yes,
your buddy's books.
These are commercials. These are written by 2 of the best captains in the world, Brett and Cecil. These guys are both awesome. Amazingly awesome.
All right, so the Renee 2 is coming up next week. I'm Todd Denkin. He's Bruce Perlowin. He's also the King of Pot, and we are learning what it took for him to become the King of Pot right here on Becoming the King of Pots. We'll see you next time.